Hey everyone, welcome back. In the last video I published here to the channel, I did a demonstration of the stinger feature that's available in some of the ATEM switchers and is hinted at in the ATEM Mini Extreme because it has a sting button, but is not currently available. In this video I'm going to actually show you how to emulate that capability on switchers that don't have it, and this will actually even work on the ATEM Mini Original and Pro series as well. You don't have to have an Extreme, you don't have to have one of the higher end production or broadcast studio or even Constellation versions. Any of the switchers that Blackmagic makes can actually do this. So first of all, very quickly demonstrate what a stinger is. So I'll do a stinger transition here. A stinger is basically a transition where you have a graphic that covers either a cut or a dissolve, a mix underneath of it. So it's a way to hide a transition, adds a little bit of spice, a little bit of interest, a little bit of graphical flair to your videos. And the cool thing on some of the higher end versions of the ATEM is that they can do this natively. They don't have to have any extra hardware to make it happen. You just upload the series of images that are used as part of the stinger into the clip store inside of the device, and then set the transition type to stinger, tweak a few other little settings, and go. It's really pretty easy. But you don't have to have that feature in your switcher in order to accomplish this, and that's what I'm going to demonstrate here today, is how to actually do this. So I will be demonstrating on ATEM Mini Extreme. The same technique works on any of the switchers in the ATEM lineup. Work with the switchers from other brands as well, so you don't have to have a Blackmagic switcher of any particular model. Any switcher that has an Upstream Key that has separate fill and key capability can do this. And so we're going to go through all of this. This is going to be a bit of a long video, so get comfortable. You probably will want to watch this on a high resolution screen. I will be doing some things on the computer. They're going to be a little hard to see if you don't. So if you have opportunity to watch this on a 4K display, preferably the larger the better, and you'll certainly get more out of this than you will if you watch it, say, on a phone screen or whatever. So pause the video here if you're watching on a small screen so you can switch to something bigger. Alright, okay, with that said, let's start with actually finding some graphics for this. So in order for this to work, you notice that there's some transparency going on here. So as the graphic is coming on and off, it's partially transparent. You know, part of the image is actually allowing the background layer to show through. In order to do that, we have to use something that's called an alpha key. An alpha key is basically where you separate the picture information from the transparency information. And those two are contained, in this case, within the same file. And we just needed a way to produce those and to be able to play back those two video layers simultaneously. I'm going to be using the I'm going to be using the HyperDeck Studio. I've got those back here behind me in order to do this today. So you'll need a HyperDeck Studio, and then you'll need to connect up in a special way. So if you've never noticed this before, the HyperDeck Studio and several of the Ultra Studio and other playback devices that Blackmagic makes, and other manufacturers as well, it actually has two separate outputs on here. There's an A and a B. And the reason for that is that this device is capable of playing back videos with an alpha channel. What it does is it plays the main graphic layer on output A, and then output B becomes the key layer, which basically the transparency information. We're going to take advantage of that, and in order to use this in order to do one of these stinger type transitions. So we'll need a HyperDeck Studio Mini, and then we're going to need a way to hook that up to our switcher. In this case, since this has SDI outputs, we'll need some SDI to HDMI converters in order to get it into the ATEM Mini Extreme. But basically any will work. It doesn't really matter which one you use. The little micro converters will work just fine. Blackmagic makes very inexpensive. You can pick those up. So again, we're going to be using a HyperDeck Studio Mini in order to play back the video that's actually used as part of the stinger transition. But you do have to have a player that's capable of outputting both the graphic and the keys. It's called the fill-in key, or alpha channel is the technical term for all of that. So what we need to do is we need to produce a video file that actually contains that alpha channel, and we'll need a source in order to find those. The source that I use myself is Digital Juice. There's a bunch of them out there, but this is the one. I've had a subscription to these guys for years. But basically we want to go into the store, and then video editor store, and then from there we're going to want to choose wipes. So any of the content that you find in here is suitable for doing this sort of transition. So if I click on one of these things, there we go. It's giving us a preview, and the A and the B actually represent the two layers of video, the two video sources that we're going to be doing a transition between. So A is going to be our starting video, and then B is going to be our secondary video. So you see it does a transition there, and this one covers up the transition fully. There are some where you have both video sources on screen at the same time, at least briefly. Those are called double alpha wipes, and a little later in this video I'm going to show you how to do a double alpha wipe. You can do it on these devices. It's a little more tricky and it requires 2 HyperDeck Studio Minis in order to make it work, but you can do it. So if that's something that interests you, stay tuned. We're going to cover that here at the end of this video. But for the most part, anything that's in the wipes section we can use. For right now, we're going to want to make sure we avoid ones that have the double alpha. And the way you can kind of tell those is you'll see at some point that the graphic covers the entire screen. So yeah, we'll go ahead and use this curved bands one because it actually does cover the screen entirely. So I'm going to download this file, and I'm going to want to download this as a QuickTime PNG with embedded alpha. So I'm going to click on that, and that file is going to get saved to my computer. I'm going to say save as, and then I'm going to put that in my Stinger directory here and click save. Alright, so we got the file, but we can't use it natively. We have to actually do some conversion on this in order to make it work on the HyperDeck Studio Mini. The HyperDeck is expecting a very specific type of file, and we need to convert that. So I'm going to use Adobe Premiere to do this. Again, not the only tool, but I'm going to open this directory. I'm just going to very quickly extract those files, get them out of the zip file. So finish that. Alright, there we go. So there is a directory containing that video file that we just downloaded. I'm going to go back into Premiere, and I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop that in there. So I'm going to grab the file and just drop that into the project. Alright. That's called 475 swipes. And if we open that up, we can see that there is an MOV file in there. That is the actual video. If I double click on that and click the space bar, you can see it play. There we go. Alright, so what we need to do is we need to create a timeline for this so that we can actually do the export into the format that we need. So I'm going to right click on that file, and I'm going to say new sequence from clip, and that creates a brand new sequence that contains that video. So as I scrub through there, you can see that video playing. And we can't see the transparency layer, but it is actually there. Premiere does support transparency. So even though it doesn't show any signs visually on screen that it does, it actually does support transparency here. So, alright, there we go. Alright, now what we need to do before we do anything else, we need to go up to the sequence menu, and then just change the sequence settings so that they match the video format that we're going to be shooting. For the purposes of demonstration here today, I'm going to be running the switcher at 1920 by 1080, so 1080p at 29.97 frames per second. So I'm going to choose 2997 for the time base, and then 1920 by 1080 for the frame size. The rest of this stuff isn't necessarily critical for what we're doing. Okay? Alright, with that, we've got our video. I'm going to just make sure that this is the video fills the entire frame. I'm going to go ahead and say set the frame size. And yeah, we can scrub through here. While we're in here, we're going to want to make a note of which frames fill the entire screen, because we're going to have to actually program in our macro that we're going to create later on that transition point. So we need the switcher to cut at the point where the screen is full of the entire graphic. So here, as I'm kind of scrubbing around, we can see that roughly at frame 23 in this video, so we'll have to remember that, frame 23, the graphic is full screen, so later on we'll include that as part of our macro. Alright, from here we just need to export this in a very specific format in order to get it to work. So on my keyboard I hit Control M, and then I'm going to choose QuickTime as the format, and then under preset I'm going to scroll down to ProRes, Apple ProRes 4444 with alpha. What that 4444 means is that it has a fourth video channel, so it's got red, green, blue, and then it also has an alpha channel, which basically contains that transparency information that we're going to need in order to make this work. So yeah, so Apple ProRes 4444 with alpha. I'm going to give this directory to save it in, and then I'm going to click the save button, and then I'm just going to go ahead and click export. This is going to take no time whatsoever. It's really quick. These videos are very, very short, so rendering time on these is also very, very short. Now with that, I'm going to pause for a moment while I copy that video file onto an SD card and pop that into my HyperDeck Studio Mini. I've connected the outputs of the HyperDeck Studio Mini to inputs 6 and 7 on my ATEM Mini Extreme, and those are coming from outputs A and B on the HyperDeck Studio Mini, going through some of Blackmagic's SDI to HDMI converters. It doesn't matter which ones you use, they'll all work. But basically that's the connection flow that we've got. And so if we look at the window, the multi-view window on the device, and I hit play on it, there you go. You see in the window, camera 6 and 7 is playing all the video files that I have on my SD card there. But you're seeing two copies of it. You're seeing the graphic and you're seeing the key channel, so the alpha channel. Basically it's telling it which portions of the image to make transparent. So anything that's black allows the background to show through, and anything that white actually is going to be replaced by the graphic. With us in the ATEM software control software, we're able to make the configuration changes that we need in order to make all of this work and to glue all the various pieces together. I should also mention that the HyperDeck Studio Mini has to be plugged into your Ethernet network, as does your ATEM Mini Extreme. That's how they're going to communicate. So what we need to do is we need to have the ATEM send a command over to the HyperDeck Studio Mini to start playback of the video, so that we can make sure that those transition times are lined up properly. We need the video to start at a very specific time, and then we need the transition to happen so many frames later. And that's what we were making note of when we were previewing the video in Premiere. We wanted to figure out which frame actually takes the video full screen, the graphic full screen, so that we can tell the ATEM Mini or other ATEM switcher in order to do the transition at that point. But before we get there, we need to do some configuration in order to make these things talk to one another. So if I go down here into the gear icon and then go over to the HyperDeck tab, you'll see a place here where you can enter the IP addresses for your HyperDecks. Now, I'm not going to go into all the steps here in order to get the IP address for your HyperDeck Studio Mini, but if you go into the Network tab and scroll down, you'll actually see your IP address there. And what we're going to need to do is enter that into the ATEM software control in order to tell the ATEM how to control that. So I know that my IP address, I looked this up earlier, for my HyperDeck is 10.1.8.67, and then I'm going to click connect. I'm also going to tell it here in the drop down that it's connected, the main output, A output, is connected to input 6 on the ATEM switcher. With that, that portion is actually ready to go. So I'm going to click on save, and that portion of it is fully configured and ready. Next thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to configure one of the upstream keys. We're going to do it on number 1 to pull in the video from the HyperDeck. We need to do it in 2 separate layers. We need to do one layer for the graphic and then the second layer for the transparency. The way we do that is we go into Upstream Key 1, set it to Luma if we haven't already, set our fill source to correspond to the A output of the HyperDeck. Again, I'm connected up to input 6 on my ATEM Mini, and then the key source to be the B output, whatever connected to the B output of the HyperDeck Studio Mini, again for that transparency information. While we're here, we're also going to want to make sure we check this box for pre-multiplied key, because these video files that we created actually do have that key value set as pre-multiplied. And that's going to make sure that we get the transparency information set correctly. With that, if I turn on, take Upstream Key 1 and place that on air, and then press play, there we go. You can see that those graphics are overlaying the image. So all we need to do now is we need to first of all tell it to only play one video file, and then we need to make sure that we do the transition of the video sources underneath the graphic as it plays. To do that, we're going to create a macro. If you've never created a macro before, it's basically a list of steps, basically pushing the same buttons that you would on your own, but doing it automatically, and you can do some timing and some other advanced things with these. So I'm going to go up to the macros menu, and I'm going to click macros, and then I want to create one, and then the stinger that we just created, I'm going to call it 475. That's the name of the original file. So we're going to call this sting 475. At that point, I'm going to press record. Now, one thing about creating macros on the ATEM switchers, they only run the commands that are included as part of the macro. So we have to make sure that any settings that we need for the macro to work properly, we are setting as we're recording the macro. So I'm going to have to go back and record and do a couple of things that I've already done. For example, I'm going to need to change the next transition. I'm going to turn off on air and then turn it back on. So that step has to be done. Otherwise, you don't know what status you're going to be starting with before you execute a macro. So we need to make sure that we set everything manually within the ATEM software. Similarly, we're going to make sure that we want the key 1 button turned off. So we don't want the key to disappear once we do the transition. And then we're going to come over to the Luma key tab. Again, just click on camera 6 or whatever input you're using, and then camera 7 for the fill and key. Click the mask button twice to turn it on and back off, and pre-multiplied, click it twice to turn it off and back on, and then click flying key twice to turn it on and then back off. With that, we know that the upstream key has been set properly. From here we can go over to the media players tab in HyperDeck, open up the menu for the clips that are available there, and I'm going to go ahead and click on 475 Swipes HD. That's the one that we want to play. So I'm going to click on that, and that will get it ready to go. Now this next part's going to look a little bit weird because we're not doing our actions now as quickly as they're going to take place when we run the macro. So I'm going to click play on this, and you're going to see the animation play, but we're not going to do the cut to do the transition right away. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and click on the play button. So if you watch your lower left corner of your screen, you'll see, there you go, the animation took place and it finished. But we still have several steps that we need to add here. Now, remember earlier that we had 23 frames that need to play before we do our transition. So at this point, I'm going to go up to the red button here up top that says Add Pause. And I'm going to add a pause of 23 frames. So 2, 3, enter that in there, and then click Add Pause. Now again, this will look a little weird because we're not doing this at the same speed that the macro will be, but trust me on this, that's what we actually need to make happen. After that 23-second pause, we can go ahead and click on the Cut button in order to do the transition underneath the graphic. Remember, in real time, the graphic is still going to be playing. So we click the Cut button to do the transition. And then we're going to need to add an additional pause in order to allow the rest of that transition to finish. So we'll have to go back and look at the length of that whole clip. So we come to the end here, and it's saying that is 1 second and 18 frames. At 30 frames per second, 1 second is 30 frames plus an additional 18. That's going to give us 48 frames. We've already delayed by 23. So we're going to need to add another pause for that additional 25, plus we want to do one more just in case. So I'm going to change and add a 26 frame pause. Click on the Add Pause button, and that should be essentially it for allowing the graphic to be played, to overlay, to do the transition. And at this point, since we're done with the video playback of the graphic, I'm going to go ahead and click on the On Air button to turn that off. And with that, our macro is actually finished. So I'll go ahead back over and click on the red button here to stop recording. And at that point, the macro should be ready to go. Let's find out for sure. So we're going to go over to the Run tab here, and I'm going to turn on this option for Recall and Run, which basically means as soon as I click on the name of the macro, it will start playing. And if everything is set up right, when I click this, you should see the graphics start to play, cut underneath, the graphics finished, and then return to the normal state for the switcher. So here we go. There we go. It worked. So yeah, let's go bigger on that, and I'll do it again. So there we go. We have actually done the stinger effect on the ATEM Mini Extreme without that feature actually being inside of the switcher. We're doing that by using the HyperDeck Studio Mini as a video playback device, and then using an Upstream Key within the switcher in order to basically overlay that graphic on top of our video while the video is playing, and then to allow that cut to happen underneath. So that's about it. And you can use that same technique on any other switcher as well. Any switcher that supports the option of doing a separate fill and key, as long as you have a video playback device that's capable of doing a separate alpha channel, an alpha channel separate from the graphic itself. So I'm going to take a quick break, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you guys the same sort of thing, but with what we call a double alpha mat, to do a fancier version of this. It's even higher end, it's more upscale than what you've already seen. So I'll be back with you in just a second. Alright, I'm back, and I have the double alpha mat transition stinger working. Wasn't without a lot of effort, so you're going to need to follow the steps I'm going to show you here today very, very closely, because every single one of them is important. Not just important, critical in order to make this work. First of all, let me actually show you what this looks like. So I'm going to switch over to the output of my ATEM Mini Extreme, and then I'm going to go ahead and trigger a double alpha transition. So here we go. So yeah, it may not look like anything too fancy, but essentially both the before and after video layers are showing through at the same time in various levels of transparency at some point during that transition. So I'm going to show it to you again, this time in a window. So click, there you go. So anyway, it's a cool thing, but it requires a lot of work, and it requires a lot of hardware actually. So in order to do this, we're going to require 2 playback devices. In this case, I'm using 2 HyperDeck Studio Minis, and we're going to need to use 3 inputs on our switcher to pull this off. So we have 3 layers of video that are being played back there. First of all, we've got the layer that actually has the graphic itself that's going to be displayed on screen, and then we've got an alpha channel for that to basically tell the switcher which portions of that graphic are transparent and which ones should be opaque. And then we've got another matte track, which basically tells the switcher which of the 2 video sources to display. So we're transitioning from source A to source B. That matte layer tells it what blend percentage of each of those layers to allow it to show through. So when we look at it, black is going to basically indicate source A shows through, and then white basically means source B shows through, and then somewhere in between is a blend of those 2. So kind of complicated, but you can do some stuff with these that you can't do with other type stinger transitions. So the stuff I'm going to be showing you here today works on any ATEM switcher that has 2 upstream keys, which unfortunately leaves out the regular ATEM Mini, ATEM Mini Pro. They only have 1 upstream key, so you need at least the ATEM Mini Extreme in order to make this work. But anything ATEM Mini Extreme and up will be able to do this. So let's dive in and actually make this happen. First thing we need to do is to actually select the transition that we want. So again, I'm using Digital Juice, but it's certainly not the only source for these in the world. It's just the one that I happen to have a subscription to. These aren't as explicitly marked as being double alpha transparency transitions, but when you look at them, you'll be able to tell. So for example, we'll look at this one, and at places in this you'll be able to see portions of both video sources. Like for example, here in the middle we've got video source B in the middle, and then video source A on the outside. So you'll have both sources showing through at some point during the course of the transition. So that's how you'll know when you need one of these double alpha, when you need to take these steps in order to make a double alpha mat work. So let's actually just download this one from Digital Juice, and so I'm going to download this as a zip file, which includes all of the files that I need. So I'm going to go ahead and save that, click OK, and once that's finished, open that up, and then I'm going to extract those files to a directory, and I'm going to minimize my web browser here, get that out of the way. Alright, so I have, these are the files that are there that make this happen. So there's 2 files that we're going to be using. The first one contains the graphic and its alpha channel, so its transparency information, and then the second one contains the transparency information that's going to be used to transition from one video source to another. So if I just do a quick look on this, yeah, so there's the main element, And then if I do this other one and press on that, you'll see transition from black to white, which is basically the transition from source A to source B. So the combination of these two files is going to give us everything that we need in order to make this happen. Alright, so let's jump into Premiere, and I'm just going to basically take that directory and drag and drop that into my project. That gets the files in there. Alright, open that up, and there's our two files. In order to make this easy, I'm just going to right click on one of these and say new sequence from clip. Alright, so there's our graphic element right there. And that also again has the transparency information, even though we can't see it here. Premiere does support it. So that's the first portion of it. And then kind of to make this a little bit easier to export, I'm going to take the other layer, the matte track, and drop that on the timeline just above it. You'll see why here in a minute. But there's that second video clip with the information that we're going to need in order to do the transition from one video source to another. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to right click on that and disable it by unchecking the enable box. We'll be switching that up a little bit later, but there we go. Alright, so next thing we're going to need to do, we need to be very careful with this, we need to go up to sequence settings, and we need to change these settings to match what our video project and what our switcher is going to be running. And in this case we're going to choose 29.97 frames per second, and then it's already set for 1920 by 1080, which is what we're going to be using here. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and click on OK, and then our sequence should be set up and ready to go. Alright, okay, and while we're here, I'm going to make a note that this entire transition lasts 2 seconds. So if I go to the end of the clip and look at the position of my playhead, we're at exactly 2 seconds. So we're going to need to know that later. And this one we're not going to have a full screen frame that's going to hide everything behind it. So we don't need to memorize that, but we do need to know how long the clip is when we're creating the macro in order to tell it basically when to stop doing its thing and return control to the person that's running the equipment. Okay, alright, so we're going to export two separate files here. The first one's going to be basically just the graphic with its transparency information, and then we're going to do a second file which has that matte for doing the transition between the two video sources. So I'm going to hit Control M to tell it to export. And in order to make this go smoothly, I'm going to very highly recommend that you create some presets in here. So I'm actually going to take the time to do that right now because it is going to make our job a lot easier. The element that has the graphics in it, we're going to need to export again as Apple ProRes 4444 with alpha. So I'm going to choose that. In this case, I don't need sound, so I'm going to uncheck the export audio. But the other thing we're going to watch out for is we're going to want to make sure that we're not using the match source option in here, because that can get us in trouble really fast if we're not careful. So I'm going to uncheck the checkboxes here for the width and height and the frame rate, and well, field order doesn't really apply here, but yeah, we'll go ahead and do that. Uncheck that for progressive and aspect ratio. So all those boxes are going to be unchecked. Alright? The reason we want to do that is we want to be absolutely 100% sure that the video we're exporting for the 4 clips that we're eventually going to be exporting here are all the same. Okay? So with that, I'm going to go ahead and click on the Save Preset button here, and this is going to be Apple ProRes 4444 with alpha, 1080p, 29.97, no audio. Alright, we're gonna use that one again. Alright, so I'm gonna go ahead and click on OK. I'm gonna click on the name here. So Kinetic Magic, let's call this Kinetic Magic Animated Wipe HD KF for key and fill. And then I'm gonna hit save. And then I'm going to export. Okay, so now we've got our graphic element exported. Next thing we need to do is export that matte for the video elements themselves. Alright, so I'm going to disable the graphic element and then enable the track with the matte. Alright, Control M. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to recall that preset we just made. Apple ProRes 4444 with alpha, 1080p, 29.97, no audio. So that's a good starting place. And then we're actually going to change the video codec from Apple ProRes 4444 to Apple ProRes 422. We don't need transparency on this one, so we can get away with 422 instead of the 4444 on this one. With that, we're going to save this as a new preset. So this is going to be Apple ProRes 422, no alpha, 1080p, 2997, no audio. Click OK, and then I'm going to click on the file here, and then I'm going to save this one to Kinetic Magic Animated Wipe HD _ matte to indicate that this is the matte for doing the transition from one video to the other. Go ahead, and I'm going to go ahead and click on Save, and then click on Export. Okay, this next part is going to seem totally unnecessary and not make any sense, but all the time I spent playing with this, I could not make it work reliably without doing this. So, what we need to do is we need to create some clips that are just black and fully transparent. Sounds weird, but we're going to need to do this. So, in our project down here, I'm going to say New Item, Black Video, and then make sure we're on the same resolution and frame rate. So 1920, 1080 at 2997. Hit OK. Alright, then we've got our black video, and then I'm going to right click on that black video and say New Sequence from Clip, and that creates us this new track called Black Video. Now I'm going to also right click on this clip itself and say Speed Duration and change that to 10 semicolon 00 to indicate that I want this to be 10 seconds long. That length is arbitrary, but that gives us plenty of time to do what we need to do. Okay, the next thing we need to do, we've got our black layer, but now we need to make it transparent. So I'm going to click on the clip, and then go up under Effect Controls, and then down under Opacity. I'm going to click on that and set that to 0. I know that seems really weird. Why in the world would we do this? But there actually is a reason for that. In order to make this whole transition work properly and using the HyperDeck Studio Minis, we need to be able to play black transparent video for a few frames before we start our other clip. I could not make it work reliably without doing this. I spent a lot of time trying. So just know that this is important, even though it seems like we're not really doing anything of any value here. Okay? Alright, so now that we've got the black in there and we've set it to be 100% transparent or 0% opaque, we can export that. So I'm going to do Control M. Now click inside the timeline there. Control M. Choose our preset that we just created, right? So we've got Apple ProRes 4444 with alpha, 1080p, 2997, no audio. Output name, I'm going to call this Black Video 4444. And then click on Export, and that makes sure that we've got the exact same format for that we had for our original graphic element. Those have to be the same. The HyperDeck won't show us either clip when we put the SD card in there if we don't have those formats be exactly the same. Now we need to export this again in 422 without transparency. So I'm going to hit Control M again, choose our other preset that we created, ProRes 422, 1080p, 2997, no audio. Click on the file name here, so it's Black Video _ 422, and then I'm going to say Save, and then click Export. Again, takes no time at all. Okay, now, with that, I'm going to take a quick break and insert my SD cards in the computer, and I'll show you how to copy those. Alright, I've got those two SD cards put in my computer, and I'm going to show you how to figure out how to copy these files to the cards in the right order. Alright, so on the left here, drive L, you can see, this is going to be the card that's going to go in my first HyperDeck Studio Mini, the one that I connected earlier that has both the A and B outputs connected, in my case, to switcher inputs 6 and 7. So this is going to be the clips that have the alpha transparency, the graphic elements that have the alpha transparency. We need to copy both of those over. So first of all, I'm going to grab that Black Video 4444. Remember, the 4444 has the transparency information, so we'll copy that one over. And then the other one that we're going to want to copy over is the Kinetic Magic Animated Wipe HD KF for key fill, right? So I'm going to take that, I'm going to copy over to that same card. All the files on a card have to be in the exact same format. That's why we created those presets in Premiere, to make sure that all of our settings were identical between the two clips. So now that we've exported the clips using the same settings, we can copy those over to the card, and then the HyperDeck will actually allow us to see those and play those back. Okay? Alright, for the other card, the one here on the right, my drive M, that's going to be going to the HyperDeck that's connected to input 8 on my switcher. And this one is going to be outputting the key that's going to actually do the transition from one video source to another. So in the demonstration I did earlier, this is going to transition us from the color bars to my camera. Alright, so on this one we're going to need to copy 2 files as well. In this case we're going to choose black video 422, and so I'm going to drag and drop that over to the card. So we've got the first one, and the other one we want is this Kinetic Magic Animated Wipe HD Matte. So we'll copy that over to that card as well. Alright, these are nice small files, so we're not talking about needing to have super large cards here, so this makes it nice and easy. Copy those over. Alright, so now with that I can eject these cards. This card is my drive L. This is the one that contains the graphic element. I'm going to put that in my first HyperDeck, and this one contains just the mat for transitioning from one video source to another. I'm going to place that in my second HyperDeck. So I'm just going to very quickly hit the play button on there. Yeah, there we go. You can see that on 6 and 7, and then on this one, you'll see this one on 8. Okay. All right. So those are the 3 video sources that we need in order to pull this off. All right. With that, we can actually go back into the ATEM software control and set up our macros in order to make all of this happen. And pull up the ATEM software. I'm going to go ahead and close this macros window for just a moment. Alright, so there's going to be a lot of steps here, and I'm going to try and go slowly enough that you can follow along. But there's a lot of steps here that are critical, so don't miss any of these. If you need to, pause the video as we go in order to make sure you get every single one of these steps. Okay? Alright, first thing I need to do is I need to make sure that I'm set up to talk to both of these HyperDecks. So again, HyperDecks have to be on the same network, and I need to go into the menus of the HyperDeck to find out their IP addresses. Once I know that, I can come into the HyperDeck tab of the settings, and this first IP address that I have in here, that's 10.1.8.67, that is the player that contains the graphic element. And this one down here, 10.1.8.68, is the player that contains that mat for doing the transition. And it's going to be important that we do that in that order here in a minute. So let's make sure that we got that. So once you put the IP address in, press connect, and then make sure you select your inputs. So again, my first one is on input 6 and 7. We only put in the first one. And then my second one is on input 8. Okay, with that, click save, and we're ready to start configuring things within the software. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and start recording this as a macro, because that's ultimately where we're going to go, and we're going to need to change these settings anyway. So I'm going to create a brand new macro, call this Sting, DA, which stands for double alpha, KinMag. And then so the second one that I've done, I did another one earlier, so I'm going to call it KinMag 2. I'm going to hit record. And now anything that I'm going to do here in the software is going to be recorded as part of this macro and get played back in a little while. Alright, so first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to make sure that our upstream keys are off air. In order to do that, we'll click on the on air button twice for our upstream keys 1 and 2. And basically do the same thing on the key 1 and key 2 buttons. So that's just basically making sure that we're starting from a fresh, clean slate, and we don't have any prior settings that are going to be screwing us up. Alright, okay, and then with that, we're going to go over to the Media Players tab, and you can see that I've got the 2 HyperDecks here available for selection. Now, because of a weird quirk in the way that some of these things work, we're going to have to play the black video that we created for just a moment on each of these 2 players. So what I'm going to do is make sure that the clip list is open here. Open that up, and I'm going to click on black video 4444 on this one, and then I'm going to go ahead and click on play. I know it seems really premature, but we're going to go ahead and click on play on that one. And then we're going to go over to the other. It doesn't matter what order you do this in. You can do it one player first versus the other, doesn't matter. And then on this other one, we're going to also click on black video 422 and then click on play on that one. Again, I know it seems like that's premature. We're not quite ready to play anything just yet, but trust me, this is going to be the best way to make this be reliable. Okay? Next thing we need to do is we need to add a pause in here, because the amount of time that it takes to start playback and actually get going, it can take a few frames. So I'm going to add a 4-frame pause. So the duration is going to be 0 seconds and 4 frames. I'm going to go ahead and click on Add Pause. Okay. Alright, with that, we can actually start playing the clips that we really want at this point. So, alright, so I'm going to go over to Cam 6 in my case, and then click on Play. Click on the clip, and then click on Play. I screwed that up. It should be fine. And then we're going to go over to Cam 8, click on that clip, the actual real clip, and then click on Play. Alright, so those have actually started playing at this point. Like we did earlier, we don't need to worry about the timing of this while we're creating the macro. We just need to make sure that the timing is right once we actually play the macro back. Okay? Alright, so video clip has started to play, but we haven't actually taken it live to air yet. So at this point, we're going to go back over to the palettes page. I'm going to start on Upstream Key 1. So Key 1 is going to be the key that we actually use in order to do the transition from one video source to another. The unfortunate thing about doing things this way is that we have to create separate macros for every video source that we want to transition to. Alright, so in my case, I know I'm going to want to transition to camera 1. And so we're going to select camera 1 as the fill source. That's the video that we're going to be transitioning to. And then for the key source, I'm going to select camera 8, which is the input on the switcher coming from the second HyperDeck Studio that we're using. Alright? I know this is a lot to follow. Just try, and if you need to, pause, rewind, whatever, in order to keep up. But so yeah, we're doing another Luma key here. In this case, we're actually going to use the video source that we're transitioning to as the fill for that key. So we're basically going to be fading that in using the video from the second player as the key to tell it when to transition each pixel and at what level of opacity. Okay? Alright. Now, come down here, press the mask button twice because we want to make sure that mask is turned off. Again, click on pre-multiplied twice. These next settings are going to vary a little bit, so you're going to want to do some little bit of tweaking, a little bit of playing around with this. But for the clips that I'm playing with right now, I found that the clip value of 50 and then a gain value of roughly 16 works pretty well with these clips. But again, that's going to vary based on what your content is. So give yourself adequate time when you're building these. Make sure you're getting the values that are going to work really well for the video clips that you're going to be using. Alright, and then next thing I'm going to do here is just click on the flying key twice in order to make sure that that is set up properly as well. Okay, that's it for Upstream Key 1, and then we're going to close that, and then we're going to make sure Upstream Key 2 is set up properly. So on this one, we're going to choose our fill source, camera 6, which is the first output from my first HyperDeck. This contains the graphical element. And then the key source for this is camera 7, which is the alpha channel, or B output, on my first HyperDeck Studio Mini. Okay? So second output, first player, contains the alpha key for the first output on the first player. Alright? And then, again, we're going to want to click on each one of these. So mask we want off, pre-multiplied key we actually want on, in this case, and then flying key we want off. Okay, with that, the keys are actually set properly. Now, the next thing we want to do here is we want to set our preview source. We're going to be transitioning, the source that we want to be transitioning to, in this case, we're going to be transitioning to camera 1. So, move the macros panel out of the way, and then I'm going to click on camera 1 on preview. There we go. Okay, and then, at this point, we're actually going to want to take both of those keys live. So we're going to click on the on air button for both Upstream Key 1 and Upstream Key 2. Okay, at this point, when we're playing back, this is when those graphical elements would actually be showing on screen. They would be visible now. So next step that we're going to want to take is we're going to want to set the delay in order to allow those to play all the way through. So remember earlier that this clip is 2 seconds, 0 frame, 2 seconds and 0 frames. So I'm going to set the pause to 2 seconds, 0 frames in here. Actually, I'm going to make it 1 just to give us a little bit of leeway. So 2 seconds and one frame. Add pause. At that point, we we're sure that the video clip is finished playing. So go ahead and click on the cut button in order to transition the video source underneath. So right now at this point our video source we're transitioning to is going to be fully opaque on Upstream Key 1. Yes, that's right. Yeah, it's going to be on Upstream Key 1. So we can safely do the transition underneath of it and know that that transition won't be visible. With that transition done, we can then turn off those upstream keys. So I'm going to go ahead and click on air for 1 and 2, and at that point we're actually done. So I'm going to go ahead and stop recording the macro by clicking on the record button there. Okay, now if all this is set up right, I can go to my switcher. I'm going to need to I'm going to go back to the color bars. There we go. So color bars, take that live. Remember, this macro only works for transitioning to camera 1. You can start on any source you want to, but the macro itself only transitions to camera 1. So if I did it right, I can click on the run tab of macros, and then click on my macro here and make sure that recall and run is turned on. And then I click on Sting DA Kin Mag 2, and if I did it right, ooh, something didn't work. What happened there? Let's try it one more time. Alright, so the video on the first player didn't play. So if you watch camera 6 and 7, it didn't actually start playback there. So let's actually diagnose that and figure out what went wrong. What I'm going to do is I'm going to save the configuration, including the macro, to an XML file, and then I'm going to pull that up in the editor, and we're going to examine it and figure out what went wrong and actually see if we can fix that. So I'm going to go up to the File menu, say Save As. Okay, and this is going to be ATEM Mini Extreme. And this is going to be DA Stinger 2, and save that file. Now until I want to save everything. Alright, and so now I'm going to minimize the ATEM software, and then I'm going to open up that directory. And in there we will see that XML file we just saved. And so I'm going to right click on that. I'm going to use Notepad++ to edit this, but whatever editor you want to use is fine. So if we scroll down to the bottom here, we'll actually find the macros. And so here it is. Here's the macro that we just really created. Sting DA Kin Mag 2. So let's figure out what happened. So for some reason the first player did not start playing. So let's look through the steps and see what went wrong. Alright, so first thing we did, set key on air to false. And then we set the transition source. We also set it to only background, so basically turned off the additional keyers. Alright, HyperDeck, we're starting playback. Okay, we set clip 0, and then we started playback on that clip. That's what these steps are. And then we on HyperDeck number 1, so they're started at 0. So first HyperDeck is 0, second HyperDeck is 1. So clip index 0, so it's selecting clip number 0, which in both cases here is the black clip. Alright, so select the clip, and then these 3 commands actually start playback. And then we've got our 4-frame sleep that we added into there. And then select the clip on HyperDeck 0. Here we go. So there's a stop command in there. So that's probably what did it. What went wrong there. So I'm going to remove that stop command. Yeah, there we go. So and then I'll remove that. So okay, yeah. So HyperDeck set source clip index. Yeah, so we need to make sure that we're selecting the clip on the first player. So I'm going to copy this command, move that up. HyperDeck set source clip index, HyperDeck index 0, so we want to do the first HyperDeck. Clip index 1, so yes, that's going to be the second clip in there. And then single clip, clip index 0, single clip enabled true, set speed 100%, and then start playback. Okay, and then we got second HyperDeck, HyperDeck 1. Set the clip index, set single clip, speed, HyperDeck play. Click HyperDeck index is 1. Okay, alright. So theoretically that should actually fix it. So the rest of this is just handling the fill and key on the upstream keys. Alright, so save that file, and then I'm going to go back into ATEM Mini Extreme, and I'm going to go up to the restore command, and then select that file that we just created, click on restore, and that should load it back in. And if everything is working right, I can go back over here, and yes, I will need to make sure that I'm not on my camera as the primary source, so I'll change that to bars, and then cut. There we go. And then click on. There we go. That worked. So yeah, I just basically had an extra stop command in the script there, and that took care of it. So yeah, when I screwed up and clicked on the wrong clip there, that's what messed it up. So yes, so cut back to color bars, and then click the macro again. There it is. So yep, looks like it's pretty close. It could use a little bit of tweaking on the chroma, or say the Luma key settings. So yeah, from Upstream Key 1, the clip and gain commands that are there, we could do some tweaking to that in order to make that look right. But aside from that, it seems to be working. And these commands work on, again, any of the ATEM switchers from the ATEM Mini Extreme on up. So the requirement on this one is you have to have 2 upstream keys on your switcher in order to make this work. So anyway, I know it's a lot to take in, and this is not the sort of thing that I would really recommend anybody do for real. It's complicated, it's very prone to breaking. There's a lot of things that can possibly go wrong here, and it takes a lot of time to set it up. So I definitely don't want to try and do this in the middle of an event. Spend time before an event. If you're going to do this, spend time before an event getting all this set up and tweaked properly. Play with all those settings. Give yourself plenty of time to just tweak it down to tweak every setting properly in order to make sure that you're getting the best visuals possible. And again, some of these are going to vary with what your source clip, vary with the source clip that you're actually using. So anyway, it's complicated, I know. May not be worth it. I've never actually used this for a client. It's not something that's worth the investment for me, but I know that there's other people out there that would benefit from this, and so here's the instructions on how to make that happen. So double alpha matte transparencies and double alpha matte wipes can be very, very cool, but again, a lot of work and not something that these switchers are set up to handle natively on their own. So it is a lot of work in order to make it happen. So anyway, if you guys have questions of this, please leave those down in the discussion thread down below the comments for this video. But more preferably, come join us on my Discord server, djp.li/discord, and talk about it there. I'm going to set up a channel specifically about doing stingers on there, and so any questions or comments that you have about this would be most appropriately sent there. So if you're new to the channel or haven't already yet subscribed, please consider subscribing. I try to do video production related content at least once a week. And for those of you who want more, I do additional videos on this channel behind a paywall. So you can either join the channel as a member using the join button down below, or as a Patreon supporter. The link for that in the video description down below as well. So either one of those will get you access to those videos. I tend to be a little bit more technical on those. You can also get to see behind the scenes for events that we're actually doing as well. So I try and shoot as much as I can, as much as the clients allow me to do that, so you can see what it takes behind the scenes in order to pull an event off. And you also get early access to videos before they go live on the main channel, at least 24 hours, and also without the advertising. So if you want to watch these videos without the YouTube ads, that's a great way to do that. So I think that's going to do it for now. Thanks everyone for watching, and have a fantastic day.